Welcome back to Ironsides Podcast After Dark. It's your host, Scott Howell, with his boy, JP. What's up?
What up?
Good to have you back, man.
Yeah, dude. It's always a good time.
Another good week. Another good day training today. Got out. We rolled around a little bit on some jiu-jitsu mats with a good buddy of ours. Learned some new stuff, transferred some knowledge, had some good laughs, some good food.
Yeah.
It was a fucking great day. I feel blessed today.
Yeah. Now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, some great food. Got to hang out with some cool people, dude. I'm not mad.
Yeah. Let's not be mad. I think just jumping right in here, today we're going to talk about introducing stress into your training program. We could look at it from a fitness perspective. We could look at it from a firearms training perspective. You could look at it in a lot of different ways. Like if you're a race car driver, introducing stress into your training program there. If you're a firefighter, introducing different levels of stress into there. Today we're going to try to make some parallels between fitness and some of these other things, but specifically what we see and what we do out on the range as civilians and what's applicable to how we train and what we're training for, which obviously is not a one size fits all for everybody.
Yeah.
So, but I think there's a lot of different things we see in all the different kind of workshops or training we've gone to, how people introduce stress. I see a lot of stuff on the Instagram and on YouTube about what people are doing. And I don't think any of it's wrong. I just think there may be some more efficient ways and effective ways to both introduce it and utilize it within your training. Cause I think it's necessary, but how it's being used is probably the more important part.
Yeah. So I don't think most of it, is well thought out. Not to like bag on the people that like use stress induced training or anything like that, the things that we're going to talk about. I just don't think there's really like a lot of thought or structure that goes into it, or even experience in some fields. And so that's why I personally really wanted to like dive into this. Yeah. So I think that hopefully the goal is after this that we have some value and some structure for anybody who chooses to train like we do or think the way we do about things, you know?
Right. It's just, we're just providing our experience and what we've seen. More specifically, I think at applying human performance training from the fitness world, which, you know, is body mechanics, it's conditioning, it's strength, it's agility, it's quickness, but it's also like learning. It's like a learning platforms, how people learn and how the body learns how to do things and be effective and efficient. So I think, you know, anytime you're going to introduce some type of stress into the training, different type of stress, and let's just call it a different variable or a different stimulus into the training program. The very first thing you got to be asking yourself is, and anybody should be asking themselves is, why am I doing this? Like, why would I be doing it? So, I mean, let's maybe break it down. Why introducing stress can be valuable, right? In your training. I think the first thing that I come up with is whenever you're training, particularly let's look at what we're doing on the range with firearms, you're always going to default to the lowest level of training that you have. So when stress starts entering into the equation, right, the things that we know, we're always going to kind of round down, if you will, to what is that basic level of skill we have in terms of proficiency, and it's going to stop there. Even when you start even adding more stress or more stimulus on top of that, it can even drop below that. So it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, I almost feel like your true skill level and your true understanding and practice in mechanics, whether it's fitness or Olympic weightlifting, for example, or powerlifting, it really shows after you start adding some of these different stimuluses like, physical induced stress or under time, doing something under time. Anybody knows like that's common sense, right? If you do something like that you have to rush through versus taking your sweet time, you get really challenged on how efficient you move throughout whatever you're doing, whether it's fitness or firearms or anything like that. So, I think in terms of where your training truly is, some of these things, I don't know, maybe they don't get trained enough. So you have almost this false sense of like confidence until you get introduced to some of this. And that's what I try to do. Like when I do any type of firearms instruction, because I come from a CrossFit background. So like it's easy for me to think, okay, maybe we need to time these things as a unit of measurement. And all of a sudden that is like what we're going to go into to create stress. You know what I mean? Because then mechanics fall apart if you have to speed up, right?
Generally, I mean, when people, again, you start adding additional stimulus, there's a give and take, right? On that scale. The more you put in, it's not necessarily the more you're going to get out. The more you might get out later, but every time you add another variable, there's something you need to be conscious of or be aware of. And I think that's kind of another big part of the why, which is, I think the other reason we introduce the stress is to create more situational type training, and situations are going to be different for everybody. I mean, hopefully you never have to get into one of these situations, but let's be honest, training different situations is fun.
Yeah,
right?
it's fun, and
keeps you fresh, keeps you sharp.
It can be applicable to a lot of different things. Like, who doesn't want to be ready for anything, right? So like if we're talking about with firearms, like self-defense,
sure,
obviously you want to be ready for anything, right? Even if we're talking about like fucking Shredder McGee, Jake, right?
Right.
Even if we're talking about
like
him,
your comp shooting type.
Yeah,
of stuff,
competition shooters, like having good movement patterns, being on a timer, maybe having a little bit better cardio, maybe a little bit better explosiveness. These are all things that like can translate into competition. It's not just like, oh, we're self-defense, doomsday preppers, zombie hunters. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I mean, you one of the big ones that I see out there right now, I see a lot on is like shooting in and around a vehicle. Look, tons of fun. And quite frankly, probably pretty practical in today's world. If you're paying attention to the news and the shit that's going on out there, like being able to handle yourself, right? And, in that situation when you're in or around a vehicle can be very important. Those situations obviously get amplified many, many, many times if you're in law enforcement or executive protection, things like that, where you're moving in and around those vehicles all the time. But that's adding a stimulus, so it's going to add a certain level of stress. It's an unfamiliar environment. It's an unfamiliar stressor. And, training that way can be very, very helpful, obviously, in terms of priming the pump for learning more, getting better, and acquiring a higher level of proficiency. And we've talked about this before a little bit in terms of that skill building. And first you have to have a certain level of proficiency, right? And, or fundamentals, within that comes a high level of awareness. So if you've never, I'm just going to go back to the vehicle thing. If you've never fired in and around a vehicle, then my experience the first time was like, whoa, that was an experience. Like I had to get all the jitters out, all the first time stuff comes out, right? It's the same in a lot of other things. If you've never done a particular exercise before, been exposed to a particular environment before, a certain level of cold, a certain level of hot, whatever it is, that initial shock value that comes out of that is important to understand and be aware of. And then from there, you can start building on it. Okay, well, I've seen that. I'm being conditioned to it. I can move to the next thing. So again, sort of the whys being, we're going to default to our lowest level of training when those stressors or those stimuluses get piled on. Yeah. And then also the situational training, how do we get better in these different environments instead of standing 5-7 yards back and shooting at paper, standing still. Right. Yeah. So there's all kinds of things and directions.
Yeah. And stress is, bottom line is, when you add more pressure to something, you're probably going to try harder. There's going to be some sort of adaptation there, right? If you people never get better at things being like lackadaisical and just hanging out and flopping around, approaching something like super chill. Usually people, like when they have intent, you know what I mean? Like these things that create stress, that's usually what drives like somebody to like put things together in a different manner. So that's more efficient.
Yeah. I think an important concept to remember going in, this is a very simple concept, it's nothing new, is the SAID principle, which is specific adaptations to impose demands. So my body will adapt to whatever it is I make it do or I put in front of it to do. Now that can be a positive thing, it can be a very negative thing, because if I'm practicing to be extraordinarily efficient or proficient at a particular movement or some certain mechanics, like again, my holster draw, my concealed carry draw, something like that, I want to continue to drill that in the best possible situation that I can, right? And try to move with the most efficiency, most effectiveness as I have, based on my limitations, based on my ability. I think in the end, it's basically about like, what is the goal of this training? And if you can get really good in a very controlled environment, right, where all the stimuli are controlled, and you know what's about to come at you, and you're really good there, you're very professional or efficient there, then it's more about, all right, so why am I doing this? Really, it's to kind of maintain or improve that proficiency or that skill set in maybe more suboptimal environment or conditions.
Yeah.
So, you know, all right, so we're in the vehicle, right? Again, I'm just using that one as an example, right? And I feel really great. We're out on the range, right? And I know where the targets are, right? I know the car now. I've reached for that door handle 10 times. I've taken my 10 reps. I know what it feels like when that concussion goes off inside that door, maybe glass flying around, if there's still glass in the car after 10 reps or whatever else. But now add the element of maybe cold, or add the element of darkness, or add the element of rain or moisture or snow or something like
the muddy range that we were at recently.
Yeah, right? It changes everything. I mean, that stimulus, well, it doesn't necessarily change everything, but it can have a massive impact.
Yeah, so, I mean, I was definitely moving slower. I'm used to like fucking exploding out of the hole and then changing directions. And like that day I was like, whoa.
Right.
You know, so like that was the first time I've ever had to deal with like mud like that, right? But I also like highly appreciated the fact that, okay, a couple of us slipped.
Yeah, and I hit the deck, yeah.
And after a couple of us slipped, we're like, okay, we're smarter than this. Let's go ahead and make cones around this. Right. But now we all recognize that your terrain definitely matters, you know?
Yeah, it adds you have to have a higher level of awareness, right? Yeah. So you're training or you're introducing these stressors so that you can have that higher level of awareness to then operate at a higher level of efficiency. I think, you know, then the next thing, you've mentioned a couple of these things. So from adding stress to your training perspective, like I think we're going to break it down into 3 basic ways you can do this. Now, this, again, I've just mentioned a few ways you can, again, change of temperature, you know, wet, cold, ice, those are all things. There are all those very, very specific, you know, stimulus that you can change within your training if you have access to certain things, or you live in a certain region or geographic or whatever the case. But we're going to break it down a little bit more simply for the general person who is maybe just starting to get a little bit more proficient with their firearm, is looking to kind of dial it up a few notches. And you named one, just in terms of what can you do to introduce the stress into your environment to, again, become more proficient. And you said it's the timer.
Yeah, timer is the number one, like the go-to for people in the firearms industry right now. There's pros and cons to everything, but the timer is the easiest. If you spend $100 on a timer or whatever, it's really good because you get to measure your time for whatever drill you do. 1 R1s, 1 reload 1s, 3 reload 3s, or like Kyle, the MT drill. Right, you have like a unit of measurement, so you can tell if you're doing better or worse in terms of speed, right? And what that does is, obviously, like I said earlier, the faster you do something, like in CrossFit, for example, the faster you do something, usually the uglier it gets if you don't have like really primed and like well trained movement patterns, right? So like, you might see somebody that's an Olympic weightlifter do a squat snatch, and you're like, damn, dude, that was really clean. Everything was good, you know, kept the bar close, all this good stuff. And then you ask them to do 30 in a row, which is, I think it's Isabel, 30 in a row for time. And all of a sudden they go from this really clean bar path to like no hip connection, power snatches instead of squat snatches, no feet movement, low back starts rounding. And that's essentially what people hate about like something like CrossFit, right? Because you add like the time domain in there, and like, oh, people are racing through movements that should be taken seriously. Well, you can think the same way about firearms. If you do it correctly and you practice and you train correctly, then you'll have somebody like Rich Froning smoke it with perfect form every single time, all 30 reps. That's somebody who's well trained, well thought out, right? Or you can have, you know, Billy Joe that's in the class that's like, oh, it's time to turn it on, dude. Fucking timer is on, and they're just like letting it rip, and you're just watching them like cringing. God, like I hate to see it. Well, it's the same thing with firearms training, right? So with firearms training, you might see somebody measure their 1 reload 1, and they're hitting like an A box at 3 to 5 yards. Okay, cool. That's pretty standard, right? You work this with dry fire. And then you go to the range and now you're working it at the range and the timer is happening, but all of a sudden you just went through dry fire on your own, and you were smoking it. Right. And then you go to the range and you're completely fucking missing the A box. Okay. So that's where the timer kind of hurts you, because maybe you're not getting full presentation. Maybe you're worried so much about that timer.
You're gaming the drill.
Yeah, you're gaming the drill, right? And it's becoming a thing that's no longer a unit of measurement. Now it's just actually a game for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I see it all the time where people, maybe it's okay to send the first of 5 shots like before full presentation, yep. But to train that way all the time where that first shot actually gets fired and like a half-assed presentation and then you line it up.
Yeah, is it even on target?
Yeah, are you even getting hits, right? So you might be getting hits at 3 yards because you might have practiced that really well, but then how much further back can you get doing that? And also, is that realistic to where you're going to be drawing like fucking quick draw McGraw every single time and then going directly into a reload? Now you're creating bad habits because you've been running this drill for time over and over and again, right? Because you're trying to save ammo, you're shooting one bullet at a time. Without going down that rabbit hole too much, the point is that like the timer has pros and cons, and I think everybody should use it. But there's also a point of diminishing returns where you ran all your things to understand how fast you are at certain drills. But then if you really start trying to burn it down and like you have to start doing weird shit that you know is probably not going to get you in a healthy position. Let's say for us, you and me, we like self-defense. That's all we train. Like today when we were at the gym, right? We weren't talking to Raul about competition jiu-jitsu. We were talking about like
self-defense.
This is street fighting. Yeah. It's just, it is what it is, right? So in that case, I don't want to create these habits of gaming a drill, not getting full presentation for only one shot, not follow-up shots leading into full presentation, and then like reholstering with catching my bullet right afterwards, and then not thinking about like, you know, actually assessing the target, assessing my surroundings and all these things. Now you created bad habits because this timer has just, you built this world around this timer.
Around the timer, yeah.
Right. And so I know like you and me, maybe we don't do that as often. Like we use the timer often, but we also don't get caught up in it. But believe it or not, that's what I've been seeing on the range with different groups. And then also on Instagram, that's the thing, dude. People like just, it's all time.
Well, I think there's some reasons. I mean, you hit the pros and cons there. If I could just add, I mean, with the timer, what, you know, the first thing I would say is like, what's being stressed, right? What is being stressed with the timer? You're basically, it's mostly speeding it up, right? When people put the timer on, it's the first thing they think is I got to beat the clock.
Yeah.
Right. The timer could be used to slow you down as well. Yeah. And so sometimes it's about how you're applying the timer that can dictate whether or not you're getting good or not. But again, yes, generally the timer speeds you up, and there's a little bit of anxiety maybe that comes with, there's a little bit of anxiousness. I know I'm on the timer, right? And there's the gaming piece, like I want to beat the timer. So you're creating this little competition in your head, or maybe competition around the guys you're shooting with or the people you're shooting with on the range, which we'll get into in a second. But generally what ends up happening, and I think you articulated it this way, it's like your mechanics start to go, right? Because you're trying to game the drill and you're trying to figure out a way around maybe using proficient, you know, high level of proficiency within your mechanics to get the gun out or get the shot off faster. Here's another piece about it that I think why you're seeing so much of it. And I debate this all day long with whoever wants to debate it. Much like CrossFit and how it got so popular was so quickly was there was a standard, there was data, right? And so that was created, and then everybody's like, well, if that's the number, I'm trying to beat the number. Right. And then there was a way for us to share the workout and the number and and create competition around it. And that was through the interwebs, right? It was posting it on Facebook, and now it's on Instagram. And so that's what you're seeing on Instagram all the time. It's like, well, so-and-so over here is doing this drill in this time, right? And that all of a sudden becomes the standard, when the reality of it is there is no standard, right? Somebody's created a standard somewhere, and now you're trying to beat that standard. Who says that should be your standard? And how practical, here it goes back to the why, right? And the goal, how practical is, number one, the drill that you're doing, right? Two, whatever the application is that you need to apply to. And number two, putting that timer on top of that application. Does that really make any sense? And I think it can get easily lost when we're caught up in the game of, I want to be faster. I want to beat that guy. I want to post it for the gram, you know? And
yeah, that's a great point. Like I seen that a lot in CrossFit, like, because I took coaching way more seriously than the actual me being an athlete thing. And I would look to people like Ben Bergeron from Comp Train. He coached like Katrin Davidsdottir to win like, I think it was like 4 CrossFit games in a row or something of that nature. My point is that like that guy, I remember him talking about building a program to where he could like absorb some of the competitive nature out of some of the workouts. So Katrin couldn't compete. Mm-hmm. So she would just do what she needed
to get through.
Like E-moms were like, no, you're only doing 5 reps of 5 snatches at 135 every minute. There's no more, less, more weight or more reps. This is the stimulus. Meaning the reason why I say that is because in CrossFit, people recognize right away, if you race the clock every single workout in a 4 to 5 piece CrossFit training mm-hmm. day, like, dude, you're fucking smoked. Your energy systems are done and you could possibly hurt yourself. Mm-hmm. Now imagine that same principles being applied to firearms, right. Except for maybe your energy systems aren't quite as taxed when we're talking about a timer.
Yeah, it's a smaller movement, right? You're not using large...
But you're shooting a gun.
Groups, yeah.
So it's scary as fuck.
I'm getting to that argument. Yeah. Like, it's not much of an argument, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole nother level of risk.
Yeah.
On top of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I definitely think that it's like we always talk about, man. I think that there's a lot of growth, and it's exciting that can happen in the 2A community and training and all that stuff like that. Not that we have all the answers, but I mean, coming from our background, like you see a lot of the similarities and you see a lot of the things in the culture that are like similar. It's just a younger culture, mm-hmm. right? And the training methods, like, dude, I know you and me have done a ton of training in different styles and stuff like that. So you totally understand, like, yeah, dude, these guys are here right now in the progression of this movement.
It's moving fast.
Yeah. So like, yeah, I mean, I guess my point is that we need timers. They're great. Pros and cons. Just think about it. Right. And
think about, so here's the last thing I'll say about it with regard to sort of the stress that you've induced there by putting it on the clock. So there's obviously a bit of like neurological stress that happens, right? There's an anxiety. So there's things that are happening. Your heart rate might get up a little bit, right? You might tense up a little bit. There's neuromuscular control at play here, or lack thereof. If you are tense, you're not relaxed. And these things all impact your mechanics. So you're ultimately impacting your physical performance, right? Or could be impacting your physical performance.
Well, the heart rate alone getting built up, that alone is a good enough stimulus to understand, like, there's value in this.
Correct.
Yeah,
correct. And I think anybody that's shot on the timer enough times, especially in a group of people, again, which we're going to get to in here in a second, what we're talking about. Like, it's now, but the challenge that I think it also brings, again, with the con is, all right, now I'm thinking about the timer rather than thinking about the mechanics. That's a con to it, right? When you sort of uncovered that a little bit. I would liken it to almost then you have this data that you have, and you're evaluating the data. And the data is really telling you there's a couple things you should be measuring here. A, your time, right? And B, your accuracy, right? So I don't care if you can shoot super fast if your accuracy starts to tank. Right. And generally speaking, when you get on the timer, accuracy can or will start to move away. Right. Yeah. So you're not quite as accurate. But what are we diagnosing and what are we looking at to be faster? And why is that important? Like, is your sub-second draw really that important? I mean, I think people could argue, yeah, it's important if you're in a gnarly situation. But if you have a sub-second draw, but you can't put a shot or shots on target, does it matter? So we're looking at this data, we're looking at this sheet of paper with all these numbers on it, and how are we diagnosing how to get better? Are we doing it based on the data, or are we using the data as a tool, right? One of many things that we can be looking at, right? Again, there's a lot of other things. There's video we could be putting with that timer to see how we're doing it.
No, that's so true. And like, that's the same thing with fitness too, right? You watch somebody's mechanics, like, dude, I PR'd, dude. If I ever showed you the video of me deadlifting 515, you probably wouldn't work out with me
I
anymore.
would never do another deadlift again because my back would hurt, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like, my point in saying that is, like, I'll tell people like, oh yeah, I did hit the 500 club, but like, I'll never do that again, even though I have it,
right?
Because I'm so embarrassed by how I let the wheels fall off so bad to make the lift.
Yeah, and you're lucky. I mean, you dodged a bullet.
Yeah,
maybe that might be not fair to say. Maybe you have plenty of strength and that isn't as risky a lift for you as it may be a lot of other people. But the point is there are other tools you can add to the timer, right? Having your coach watch you, having your buddies watch you, getting some feedback. Video is extraordinarily important because I'm not diagnosing the problem or whether or not I'm getting better or not simply by the timer. And I think that's an important concept for people to understand as we kind of move through these things. Timers very easy to implement. You can do it at home with dry fire, and you can do it on the range. So it makes it very accessible and usable. There's a lot of utility in that timer, but just, I think to your point, just be careful about what you're doing, or maybe it's not careful. It's think about it. Like, what's the true value in using this timer for this particular?
Just watch the video of yourself. Cause like, even with like weightlifting, I'm always telling people, dude, don't be weird. Just video yourself and we can diagnose what's happening here.
So much value in that. Yeah. And you can do that even if you're on the range by yourself and look at it later. I mean, today's day and age.
Just because you have a video doesn't mean you have to post it. You can actually use it for yourself to learn something.
Yeah, it's not like it didn't happen if you didn't post it. Right? So moving on, like another one that I think this is probably, for us, and we've discussed this sort of at length, I think this is probably the most overlooked way to introduce stress. And it sort of happens by default, when you're out on the range with a group, whether that's in a workshop or on a range day or with your buddies or family or whatever. And that is the added stress of peer pressure, right? And just having your peers around, knowing you're being evaluated, whether that's, again, by an instructor, if it's in a private lesson or in a group lesson or whatever the case, but also your buddies, right? Yeah. Add that to the timer piece, right? And everybody sort of starts to compete at some level. Again, going back to the whole CrossFit analogy and, am I better than this guy or is he better than me? Whatever. The peer pressure piece adds a certain level, can add a major level of stress to that environment that can have its pros and cons as well.
No, definitely. I have a lot of experience with this in the firearms world, obviously in CrossFit too, but I guess I just take it less serious as an athlete. But in the firearms world, man, I really see it. Like, I've been to so many courses, so many range days with buddies where it doesn't matter timer or not, which obviously with a timer, it's a little bit more effective. But running one by one and having the entire group of people, whether it's buddies or an actual course that you're at, watch you. For one, you don't want to fuck up.
Yeah, nobody wants to fuck that guy.
No one wants to be everybody's eyes on you and then you fuck up and then it gets worse because you keep fucking up. I've seen that happen where somebody fumbles and then they're just like, oh shit, I fumbled. And then like, we want to give up. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, no, you got to finish it out. And then they fumble more. And it's just this whole fucking thing. But also that's kind of like a healthy added stressor. Cause like, as long as it's encouraged with like, real like team effort, like we're trying to make each other better. It's not like shit talking, right? You know what I mean? Then it's actually good, like a good stressor to add. I've seen better shooters than me, like clearly better shooters than me.
Just fall apart.
I beat them at certain drills where there's like a lot of movement and things like that. And there's a couple things that go into that. I'd say for this example though, maybe it was a little bit of physical stress, but I would have to say that the timer and everybody watching you, as soon as you make one mistake, that one mistake just leads into like a snowball because you feel really bad or really flustered because guess what? Everybody's watching you. Now you take that same scenario, you put multiple lines or anything like that. And I've seen this multiple times. It's with multiple training groups. You kind of get lost. And so like if somebody fucks up, I took a course one time where I think we had like 3 lines set up and I was like fucking up pretty bad. And I was like kind of mad. Not even that like
when you say fucking up, what do you mean?
Like it was cold outside and I couldn't all the way feel like, even though I have base plates, I couldn't all the way feel if I was inserting the mags all the way, even though like I was, actually reloading, feeling the touch of the mag.
So you're fumbling around.
I couldn't tell if I was like actually inserting them all the way. So I ended up trying to shoot with a mag that fell out. Right.
Okay.
And then I ended up trying to reload that and then didn't actually have one in the chamber somehow.
Bang, yeah.
And then like this snowball of shit. And this was actually the opposite of me because I was lost between 3 lines. No one caught it. And I'm just sitting here thinking like, what the fuck? I'm paying for this course. And like, no one caught it.
Nobody's coaching you.
I did all that shit. And like, And this is like actually a really good training group. So I was actually surprised that I like got kind of lost in this particular scenario, but it was a larger class. It was like 27 people. But anyway, my point is like, that's like the opposite end of the spectrum, right? Like, because we were in 3 lines, I ended up getting lost and nobody was like telling me what the fuck I was doing wrong, or what the fuck, dude, you're shooting without a mag or whatever. And I'm just like kind of confused in the moment. Like, why the fuck is my gun jamming? And I look down and like, I have loaded mags on the ground and a trail behind me. You know what I mean?
Sorry.
Yeah, dude. I'm just like,
I'm
what
not
the
talking
fuck?
shit.
Yeah. No, it's funny though.
Yeah, that's a mess.
Yeah. So like I had to like elaborate everything that just fucking happened while I have 2 other lines of people next to me popping off, but I have to move with them because I can't get behind or in front of them while we're all moving together. So my point is, peer pressure is good. Single file lines is good because not only is there pressure from your peers, hopefully positive encouragement, but also you don't get lost. You don't get lost with, you know, everything that's going on, all the chaos.
Yes, I think your point there is from a peer's perspective or a peer pressure perspective, we're using the pressure as maybe most people might think of that as like a negative thing. It doesn't have to be a negative thing. The pressure that you're feeling is a good pressure to perform and want to do well. That's good. There's a drive there. That's to be acknowledged and celebrated. I want to do well here, and feeling that pressure internally, and then feeling that pressure maybe externally as well. So intrinsic versus the extrinsic from the team, from the group, right? And entering into that, like, we're all in this together. Our safety is dependent on that. Our growth is dependent on that. And, you know, having those layers kind of stack up. If everybody's in that mindset, right? Again, the peer group is working together, then it's likely that all those levels of things that happened, right, that created another problem on top of another problem on top of another problem for you that were out there, don't all of a sudden become completely overwhelming. And maybe an example of that is, you know, we were out the other day and a guy was having a little bit of a trouble with his weapons, fairly unfamiliar weapon to him, and he was, pistol, and he was really struggling mechanically with it. And, I was just kind of watching him go through it. And the last thing this guy needed to do is feel like he should be rushed at that point, right? So, the line that we were working in and the people that were around were just kind of gathered around and go, that's cool, man. Let's just continue to work the problem, go through your checklist. So that peer pressure very quickly can turn into like peer help, right? And support. And versus like, we're not racing this thing. But my point of this whole thing and layering on the peer pressure, I think is an overlooked thing that can be very valuable, but can also be very destructive if it's not managed correctly. I guess the tone or the expectation at the beginning of the day or within your group or the beginning of the class or whatever the case isn't kind of, the groundwork isn't laid.
The tone and the energy, the type of energy you're putting off, that matters. Like when I first started shooting, I bought a G17 and I first started like really trying to like get to the range on a regular basis, just whatever indoor range, just work on marksmanship because that's all I had available at the time. Dude, I had a friend that just would talk so much shit, dude, so much shit. And like, it got to me, man. I guess you could say like I was weak in the moment for letting like this guy be like, man, you're not hitting shit, this and that. You know what I mean? And like, dude, it would like ruin my training sessions.
You're right.
Right. And so like there's a power, negative and positive through that. Right. So we're talking about peer pressure, but it should be like camaraderie. Mm-hmm. It shouldn't be like, dude, like talk shit the whole time, especially when you're dealing with people with firearms. Probably don't piss off your friends. You know what I mean? But I mean, yeah, I definitely think that there's a lot of weight in this and how you approach it. Like I said, it could be very good and informative to have everybody around you watching too.
Yeah.
Right. Because like everybody's like, well, fuck, for themselves and for you.
So embrace it.
Yeah.
Embrace that pressure.
Yeah.
Because there's things that are happening there in that pressure that or in that moment that could be replicated in a different type of uncontrolled environment, right? Or a different environment. I mean, what happens when that peer pressure is there? You're being pressure to perform. You're being watched. You're being evaluated. Again, that raises anxiety levels. There could be some hormonal changes that are going on in that very moment, right? Could be some physiological changes from a heart rate perspective, right? That the heart rate starts to go up a little bit, right? Your muscles tense up a little bit. You start to feel a little bit more stiff. These are the same fucking things that happen to people when they get caught in a disaster or in a very, very like tragic or dangerous situation. So the more you can condition your body, right, and your mind, right, and your mindset through this type of sort of peer pressure, again, knowing that you're in a safe space, like, and I've heard this referred to as like you set the container of safety in that training. At the same time, you don't let people get away with shit. So if it becomes that peer pressure, could also become like, hey, get your shit together. We're not fucking around. Like, you're dicking around. Like, this isn't cool, man. We're all out. This is serious. We're all out here trying to get better, and you're not. This isn't the time or place for that. I think it can be valuable. It can be a huge pro in that peer pressure when that container is set, when that tone is set, and everybody being on the same page right from the get-go.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much benefit to it, man. And it can be a positive thing too, in terms of like lighthearted. Like, I know because I'm really big on California compliant stuff, like trying to like be a good representative. Not like, I know it's not good that these laws are in place. I get that. But my point in this is saying that like, so like I'll run 10 round mags, you know what I mean? And because I run 10 round mags, you got to reload a fucking lot.
Yeah.
Right. And so I don't know how many times you're
holding up the drill. You're worried about holding up the drill.
So like, no, I'm the type of person that like, I don't like fucking, maybe this is a bad habit, but for training, I actually really enjoyed it, where I just never would like go up to a drill and be like, oh, let's put a new mag and just be ready. I would just always leave whatever's in there. Yeah. So I was always surprised. I liked that. I don't know why. I just fucking like always being surprised, you know, but I also know that this same course, the instructor was like, motherfucker, dude, like, right. Always be ready. Like, walk up to the line ready.
I am.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but in your mind, my idea of ready and his idea of ready, or your idea of ready and his idea of ready, were two different things.
Yeah.
Because that wasn't set up as a parameter from the get-go. Yeah. If that's what he expected, he should have laid that down.
Yeah, exactly. So like we would be running like the line and everything like that, one at a time, big group. And like I draw, click. And I think you know now that I don't get slide lock because I have like a big fat palm. And so I'm just like, draw, click. And they're like, are you fucking serious? And I'm like going through a reload, and then I finish out the drill and there's no issues. But because I did that on a consistent basis, it became like a running joke between the whole class that not only made it like a lighthearted thing, but everybody walked up to the line and was like, well, shit, is my gun loaded?
Check.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so there's benefits in multiple ways is my point. You know what I mean? So, and on top of that, it's like I've said before, dude, like the best type of coaching you're going to get, and this is why it's the most expensive form of coaching, is the one-on-one attention.
Yeah. I mean, assuming you got a great coach. Yeah. Assuming you got a good coach, and there's a lot of great ones out there.
Yeah.
And there's also some not so great ones out there.
Yeah. So, I mean, like it is what it is, dude. It's common sense. Like you go to a class setting, you're going to get great coaching, but it's not going to be revolving around you
and your specific needs.
Yeah, exactly. And then let's say you want to pay somebody like fucking $1 trillion to give you exactly what you need, and they train LeBron James, then guess what? Like that's what it's going to cost to get his trainer to do one-on-one with you, not a class. Right.
But that said, like that takes the peer pressure piece out of it. Again, there are pros to being in those groups and being challenged or maybe pushed at a level. And I'm not soft. Like if I've messed up, quite frankly, I want people telling me I've messed up. Like you messed that up. Right. Yeah. But be constructive with it. Like, or give me an opportunity to remedy it or whatever else. Again, it works both ways. The peer pressure is an easy, and it can be a fun and effective way to add that stress to your training program.
Definitely.
That's inside and outside the gym. And so here's the thing to keep in mind if you're going to the gym or you're going to the range, and whether you're a participant or you're an instructor, if you've been doing this long enough, like it's very easy to see where people are with regard to how they feel in their environment, right? If you got to be an expert at reading people, but my point of that is like when I see a new person, I can tell a new person in the gym every time.
Yeah.
They carry themselves a certain way. They look a little confused. They look a little out of place. They're not sure where to stand. They're not sure what to do with their hands. Where do they put their stuff, right? Are they talking to anybody while everybody else is seeing their buddies from the last one, or people they hadn't seen in a while, or people they recognize from, wherever on Instagram or whatever they're doing? Again, talking to the instructor, who's the person that's kind of sitting out on their own and not fitting in, right? And that's the person that doesn't need peer pressure from a, more of that again, like they need that person doesn't need pressure. They need encouragement. We'll talk about that in a little bit at this point. Like they need to feel comfortable in their environment rather than have, again, like being in the gym, we call it gym embarrassment. Gym embarrassment just leads to a lot of issues, right? Not fully understanding the instructions. Cause you know, when you get to that point when you're so stressed out, maybe from being in a group of people that you don't feel comfortable with, like you get dumb. Like you can't hear shit. You can't see shit. You can't remember stuff.
No,
right.
100%. And like,
that's a problem for everybody.
Yeah.
Man.
Like I always try to say, like, there's a lot of parallels, right, with fitness and firearms, but it's always just a little bit crazier because we're dealing with guns.
Yeah. I mean, the element of safety is certainly,
you know, so
level
like,
100.
Yeah. Like the heart rate isn't up because we're fucking sprinting on bikes. It's up because you could fuck up real bad.
Right.
You know?
So again, a level of awareness for when it's appropriate or not appropriate to add that peer pressure, but a great tool to add to your training with regard to adding a little extra stress and or learning how to control or become conditioned to that stress. The last thing in kind of the what types of stress you can sort of put together. And this one's getting popular too. I got from a gym guy's perspective, I watched some of this stuff happen, and I've had a lot of conversations with instructors or other shooters or whatever that are sort of more into the physical fitness side of things. And I don't understand a lot of what I'm seeing out there, but it's adding like the physical component, right, to the training. And that, you know, generally what I see is people are running from cone to cone, right, or from barrier to barricade or something like that. From barrel to barricade, or something like that. We're starting to add some physical movement, right, which is going to elicit certain physiological effects. The heart rate goes up, the muscular fatigue goes up, right? The breathing rate goes up. Those are all factors that come into it, and those are all great things to add to your training when applied, appropriately and properly. So yeah, you can add physical and physiological fatigue. And I think there's, I'm not going to say there's a right and a wrong way, but I'm going to say there's better and not so good ways to do it.
Yeah. So, I mean, anything firearms related, I mean, you and me aren't going to sit here and be like, there's only one way and we're the fucking answer. It's not that, but I am going to say I'm super excited to talk about this because we do understand fitness pretty well and what it does to your body. And when people start applying firearms and fitness, it's scary enough watching somebody do bar muscle ups for time, let alone with a fucking gun. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so let's break this down a little bit. Usually, like you said, it's we're getting physical stress, and that's from running. That's like the most basic one, right? And that's applicable because everybody needs to run if this is really a self-defense scenario or some form of that in competition, right? Maybe even it's just a little bit, but it's there. So running is pretty common. But it's also kind of weird too, because how much of it do you do to get like a stimulus? What's your goal stimulus? Like we talked about in the beginning, right? What's your goal here? So like for running, what's your distance? What's your why? And on top of that, what is the person that's doing the drill? How much running have they done in their life?
What's their current health and fitness status?
Yeah, like where are they? Or I shouldn't even say in their life. Like how much have they recently been running? Mm-hmm. That's important to know, right? Like even just verbally being like, "Bro, please don't lie to me and just let me know where you're at." Because like, let's get the most out of this course for you, instead of just like, dude, we're all fucking grinding out a mile.
Yeah, it would be the same as pulling somebody into the gym for a group or a personal training session. Like I have to do somewhat of an evaluation. I need a level of awareness.
Yeah.
Which means the participant needs a level of awareness, and sometimes they might not have that.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes they might not have that. So sorry to cut you off.
No, that's good. But yeah, with running, I think that's really applicable for everything, but also doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best form of training on a regular basis. And also, like I said, the distance. What are you trying to get out of like speed, and how much of it are you trying to do, and why? Like, what's this person's profession? Why are they even doing this running and shooting? Because we could talk about a SWAT team guy that's doing about 20 yards total of running the entire time, right? Or we could be talking about fucking recce, you know what I mean? Where it's not even running really. It's like hiking and walking a lot with weight, vests, backpacks, shit like that, right? Mm-hmm. So like learn the students, the people who are paying you, That doesn't mean that every course has to be tailored to each individual, because this is a course setting, not just an individual setting. But knowing these things is definitely good for setting up the course. Like, I think we've talked about this before, like getting some background on the people who are taking your course. Right.
Yeah, we definitely talked about this before.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that being said, like how much running, that's a big part. Energy systems is a big part. Getting somebody to puke within a minute versus getting somebody to run a couple miles versus somebody walking 20 miles. Right. So before getting down through all that, like that all matters. Right. And then there's also, are their fucking ankles and knees and hips ready to run? Not everybody's like a fucking fitness instructor or an athlete, so you're not gonna be able to break all that down for everybody.
Yeah, what's your readiness level?
Yeah, just having some sort of like evaluation, some basic evaluation. Like looking at somebody, you can usually tell, even asking them to just do the simple forward running for 10, 20 yards, you can kind of tell, oh shit, like dude's got some weak ankles, he's on skates. You know what I mean? Or maybe he's like actually not running, he's kind of waddling. You know what I mean? But again, running's really applicable. Not actually my go-to. It's something that I do often on the range, but I actually try to do it as minimal as I can, because I know that there's joint pain.
Yeah, it's high impact.
It's high impact, and it's an easy way to roll your ankle if that's literally all you do all the time, especially if you're not doing the background stuff like hitting the gym.
Yeah, I'm just going to say right now, like if you need or want to become a better runner, don't fucking do it on the range.
Don't do it. No.
That's not the time to practice it.
No.
Right? That's the time to express the ability and the strength and the skill that you built outside of there, like in the gym, like at the park, 100%. On the track or whatever. That's the time to express those things. Not train them there. Like because if you can't do it, again, or you're not proficient at it, then again, you shouldn't be doing that with guns in your hand.
Yeah. And it's always amazing to me too. Like I know the 2A community is a bunch of hard asses.
They like to think they are.
Yeah. But, dude, do you go to the gym and like not warm up?
No, it's just, and by the way, I learned the hard way, the consequences of not doing that properly for long periods of time. Like my body's wrecked, because of things that I did or didn't do, more specifically that I should have done more of, before I challenged myself with lifting heavy shit, right? Or challenging myself by jumping and running and moving explosively, right?
Straight up.
Of course you're going to warm up.
That's why, like, even though I have heavy lifting in my program, like twice a week or whatever, you won't see me doing those on the days that I don't have time to warm up.
Well, I'm just going to say this, like if you're an instructor out there, or even, if you're an instructor out there or a coach, and you're about to move into some type of a movement where you're asking people to run around, move laterally, change directions, stop, decelerate, those kind of things, and you're not taking them through a warm up, well, that's fucking malpractice as far as I'm concerned. That's negligence.
Yeah.
And it's willful, because you shouldn't be, because if you don't know it, that just means you're ignorant. And the last thing you should be doing is having people run around your range with guns in their hands if you haven't warmed them up properly to do it. Now, does that translate over into real life? Like if you all of a sudden you're in a situation, you got to run from a tiger?
Yeah. I mean,
it certainly provides a certain level of the doing that provides your body a certain level of training, right? And resiliency to be able to handle that.
Of readiness from training that. But I mean, dude, like, I think it's amazing that people are just like, fucking do lions, warm up before they hunt gazelle. First of all, we're not fucking lions, dude. We eat processed food and all this bullshit, dude. Don't do that. But let's be honest, dude. Just be smart.
Yeah.
It's like 5 minutes, dude. 5 minutes of basic blood flow in the joints, a little bit of stretching to open up like things like the hammies if you're going to be running, the quads and the hips. Like it's literally like 2 stretches and some joint stuff, right? But without going too far into fucking warming up, I think that's a part of adding running into the physical portion of stress-induced training.
It's easy to do. Most people can. I mean, we're built for that, right? We're built to ambulate. We're built to run. That's what humans do, right? Bipedally. So it makes sense that you would put that in there, and it seems very practical, right? You're moving around.
As long as there's a reason behind the distances.
Correct.
Right.
And or the directions. Yeah. And it needs to make sense. Again, what is the goal?
Yeah. Yeah. So like there's that. And then there's other things that people have been implementing, like because of things like the tactical games. all of a sudden people are implementing farmers carries, like heavyweight and kettlebell swings, things like that. And there's a place for that in terms of energy system training and maybe even grip training, because like that's kind of an odd thing to do.
That's really practical, and there is a place for it if you're going to go into the tactical games.
Yeah.
But if you're not, I would argue that it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I would say that like most likely some sort of MMA bag or brute force bag would be the go-to for any type of carry. I mean, I guess a couple of carry like kettlebells might be good because I mean you're carrying.
You're just adding external loads.
Yeah, maybe
it might be practical because you have something that's weighted to do that. But
I mean, like what is it really doing? It's kind of taxing the grip a little bit. Like if you're doing some heavy farmers carries before going into a pistol thing, and you should have strong grip. But I mean, is that something you're training on the range?
Is it a great use of time?
No, it's really not. Like train the grip in the gym. Don't train it on the range. From what I can see, I just don't see that being applicable. Like I said, if you're going to do like some sort of odd object load, like some sort of like sandbag, like a brute force bag or like straight up like punching bags, the different forms of MMA ones, those ones are a little bit more applicable for like what dead weight on like a partner carry would be. That's
what I was just going to go with that. Like if you're in military, law enforcement, and there's a chance you could be carrying heavy cans of ammo, out there you're a war fighter and you're out there on the battlefield. Okay. Maybe there's a time and a place for that. Let's train practically for what that is on the range versus off the range. And certainly if you're in law enforcement, it would be much the same as like if you were a firefighter, like you need to be able to potentially drag a body, your buddy, a victim, away from a dangerous situation. And you'd want to be practically trained for that. And there could be a case to be made for you might have to shoot and drag somebody and shoot again. So you'd want to maybe train in that environment so that you know what that feels like. But you're not going to build a high level of conditioning, strength, stamina, and again, competency out there on the range. That shit should be trained in the gym.
Like when you do shit like that, don't think you're doing anything other than creating like an adaptation. And like a small one, I mean, and then just getting that actual experience of what does this feel like with a live gun,
right?
You know what I mean? But again, we have a live gun, so maybe practice that shit with like a cert gun in the gym first,
right? What about the argument that somebody would make? Well, yeah, I mean, but that happens in real life every day. People are not carrying heavy cans, right? And then doing heavy carries or kettlebell swings, and then getting into a gunfight. Yeah. Now there could be a case made for having a wrestling match, right? And doing that. So you know what that feels like under stress. But again, to your point, there are props you can use that are very, very, very realistic that reduce the risk greatly and allow you to do that in a situation where you can do tons of reps and, get again, that stimulus, that specific adaptation to the imposed demand. And that's going to be more like a mental or a mindset training or an awareness training, not a physical fitness training. You're not going to get that.
I mean, you're going to get some sort of, like I said,
I got to work out for the day. But
you got some sort of conditioning out of it, but it's not the best form of like fitness that you could have gotten for that day, right? I was actually doing some training like this because like with my program, I'm trying to do like weekly tests. You know what I mean with this kind of stuff. So I was doing some of this training with like my buddy John last week. We're flipping tires, doing sled pushes and sled pulls, and then going into an airsoft Glock and hitting like a TA target steel at 10 yards. But that was like a completely controlled, safe environment. Like an airsoft Glock, you can virtually point and shoot with your mechanics if you're trained, right? And like hit. You don't even have to see front sight post because it's like 10 yards with an airsoft gun. Minimal recoil. Yeah. The point is though, is like there was training that can get done with like tire flips and sled pushes, which really taxes the central nervous system. That it's like almost like an anaerobic type thing because we're doing intervals like partners, tag team. You know what I mean? You're going into shots with an airsoft gun. That kind of builds in like that muscle memory of like, fuck, I'm really tired from tire flips. I'm really tired from like this 300 pound sled push. And then I go into a Glock airsoft gun, like a simulation gun. I know what that feels like now. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to miss because we did all that. But also now we know like one of my buddies, he kind of got sloppy with his presentation after running through that. His mouth's open, kind of drooling a bit.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But we learned that with an airsoft gun. We didn't learn that at somebody's course. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Agreed 100%.
Yeah. So
I get it.
Yeah.
We're on the same page.
Yeah. So like, I think that people can get more creative.
They're reaching.
Maybe the word is lazy. I don't know. Maybe in terms of like strategy and like building a course layout. Or maybe there's also just like a shock factor that they want to apply.
Okay. So I think there's two things. One is what you just said there. One is like, I need to provide something sizzly to get people to my course or my class, right? Something I can build content around that's badass. Look at those guys that are going at it in a wrestling match, or they're fucking flipping tires on the range, and then they're running and shooting and doing all this other stuff. I think there's some shock and awe value, some sizzle value.
Yeah.
That is definitely going to be part of it. But I think for the most part, I just think it's a misdirected enthusiasm or energy. Yeah. You know, like they probably really think they're doing the right thing. Like, oh, this makes perfect sense. I'm really tiring myself out here and fatiguing myself. And then I have to come up and I have to put shots on target at, 25 yards, super fatigued. Well, okay. Right. Like I get that. But to your point, like, is that really appropriate for most people, right? Out there in Joe Blow's movement fundamentals course or whatever else. And are there other ways we could put this type of training in there so that when that does happen or when that is introduced, I have a higher level of conditioning, right? And I don't think that happens out on the range. I think it happens in the gym.
No, dude, this is exactly what we're doing, like building this culture here at Red Dot, like getting everybody in here from the firearms community to like train in here and be introduced to that in like the safest way. Like we're doing like, little bit of like intense like CrossFit workouts that are like 10 minutes or less. Like I'm talking 5 minutes. But then like as we start getting comfortable with everybody tapping to that athletic movement, the anaerobic energy systems, these are people who don't work out a whole lot at all. Once I see that here in the gym, then we can start implementing the lasers, the CERT gun. Then we can start implementing the airsoft, because I know all these motherfuckers airsoft. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Most of them do.
And then at that point, which then we can start getting comfortable with that firearm, because I know all of them can shoot well standing still. And so we have that confidence. But I mean, I think people need to be groomed into this type of training. And there also has to be an understanding of why you're doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So just showing up to a weekend course and implementing this into your training for the first time, probably not a good idea. Think about it as a consumer, before you're signing up for that stuff. What is the goal? What are the foundations that I need to have in order to make this worth my time, worth my energy, and actually help me rather than just give me an experience? There's something to be said for experience, but without the right proper foundation, you could just be layering on some very bad habits, some bad mechanics, a false sense of security, a false sense of reality to how that might end up ultimately playing out in a real life situation or real life scenario. And I'm gonna say it. I've said it 100 times. I am no expert on any of this shit. I have spent 25 years in the fitness business, and as a coach and as a performance coach, I do know a little something about that. And I've spent enough time in the range to see some really stupid shit happen. And I just think you could separate it and get just as much value out of it. So if you're a coach out there that's implementing this stuff in there, we'll go back to this conversation we've had before. You better be vetting your participants.
Yeah.
You better be setting them up for success, putting them in a situation to win, right? And at the same time, being cognizant of when to and when not to. Same as I would tell somebody that comes in to work out, like, hey, you might feel like you can do that because you got the engine to do it, but your mechanics suck. And I'm going to ask that you dial it back here a little bit, which is a hard thing to do for somebody that's ready to roll, that has a high level of proficiency in one thing, but not in another.
Yeah.
Right. It might be hard for them to dial it back, but it's a matter of safety. And it's also a matter of building, going back to that level of awareness and confidence, building the right kind of awareness and the right kind of confidence.
Yeah, like I see that shit in CrossFit all the time, where I'll see somebody like, let's say me, like I'm a slightly above average CrossFitter, I guess you could say, when I'm training with my fucking 21-year-old athletes that are whooping my ass. You know what I mean? I guess I can hang here and there, but my point is that like you'll see somebody whoop my ass in a workout and I'm like, dude, I'm not impressed, dude. That was the ugliest fucking clean I've ever seen in my life, dude. You did that for time. Good job.
Right.
You know what I mean? And these people are better athletes than me, so it's nothing to take away from. But my point in saying that is that like, you need to clean that shit up and then beat me at like a time to work out. And then not only did you beat me, but now you did it like correctly, and you're probably going to have longevity. Right.
That's the bigger piece of this.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. So like, I know that the most successful athlete that I've ever worked with is a master's athlete, and she doesn't skip the details. She's the person that every fucking day, dude, is doing the accessory, the functional bodybuilding every day, dude. Every day, doing all this kind of ab stuff to keep her back healthy, all this shoulder banded stuff to keep her shoulders healthy, and all this kind of shit, dude. And I tell her all the time, dude, you're the most important role model at the gym that she's at. It's not the people who clean and jerk 400 pounds. It's the person who pays attention to details, stays disciplined, and actually works through everything, not just the fun 3-minute CrossFit time to work out.
Yeah, I think that's the lesson right there.
Yeah, just being...
How does it translate?
Yeah, exactly, right? And dude, she's fucking... I don't want to like fuck her age up, but like I know she's at least late 50s. You know what I mean?
Well played.
Yeah. You know what I mean? But yeah, no, dude, super fucking stud. But anyway, my point is that like there's discipline and rhyme and reason to her whole training, so that when it comes time to being dumb and doing a timed fucking workout with movements that aren't supposed to be timed,
right?
She smokes it and she doesn't hurt herself.
Yeah, because she can throttle back when she needs to or whatever. And actually, I think we should talk about that. So the next part of this is like, we kind of talked about what you can introduce, the timer, the peer pressure, again, obviously the physiological challenge, right, of doing different things, whether that's moving around or, changing directions and things like that, but more specifically outside the gym versus on the range. And then again, expressing the work that you've done and the body that you've built and the performance that you have underneath your belt and your conditioning out on the range effectively, where you don't have to think about any of that. What you're worried about is, or what you're thinking about is being proficient at the skill or the challenge that's been laid down in front of me. And it's not the running, right? It's not the running or the changing direction. No. That's just, that's what I'm doing up top is an extension of what I already need. I know I can do, and I'm confident in doing down low. So there's a couple of things like in the terms of how you apply this stuff. What are ways that you can effectively apply the timer, and what we can be thinking about, whether on the range or off the range? One of the easiest things to do is dry fire with the timer. Yeah. I mean, that's a good way. And you can video with the timer as well. It's a great way to do that. And again, not introduce some of the other, like, again, if you're new to this, you might even get stressed out by just the gun going bang.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And having to worry about that. Or again, you mentioned some of the things with like press checks and do I have ammo in this gun? And reloads and things like that. Take all that out of it, from the line, being on the line with 10 other shooters or whatever else, and just dry fire your house.
Yeah. Yeah. I know, like with me, like I said, in the CrossFit world, maybe I crawl people into walking a little slower than most coaches. But same thing with firearms. I've done a lot of one-on-ones. And I actually go over dry fire for fucking 45 minutes or so before we actually shoot anything. And a lot of people that aren't the people doing the dry fire, a lot of people that are outside, man, you really go that long? You know what I mean? With dry fire. And that's my own thing. Maybe nobody else likes to do that, but I want the person to feel fully confident before they break off that first round. When we're talking newer shooters here, that their draw is good. They understand how to drop the mag. They understand how to reload. They understand presentation. I can see their grip is good. And obviously after shooting, we can see how tight that really is holding in place, right?
Then things start to rear their ugly heads.
Yeah. But like,
because you've introduced stress.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like dry fire, dude, it's so much, dude. It's so much. The dry fire I've personally done from my own training has boosted me up faster than anything else. Like, of course you need bullets. You need to shoot those rounds so you can get recoil control. But dry fire will catch people up real quick with a timer, with physical and induced stress. You know what I mean? All these things can be done with just dry fire. Like, don't be dumb. Like, I like to use a SIRT gun, so I know for a fact that it's not a real gun when I'm doing like physical induced stress or like airsoft guns. But if we're talking just like actual manipulations with the firearm you use on a regular basis, yeah, dude, it's free. It just costs some time.
That's right.
I mean, 10 to 30 minutes a day is what I was doing my second year of shooting. Not anymore. I'm not gonna lie. I just don't make as much time as I should.
Sure.
But point is though, is that, dude, like, yeah, dry fire goes a long way. It's not the end all by any means, but it goes a long way.
It's not shooting, but it gets you pretty damn close in terms of building mechanics and, again, proficiency in those mechanics. Which then, again, you're building the proficiency, you're building the fundamentals to then take to the range. Yeah. So I don't think you can get enough practice there. You know, it's always good to also check your equipment, make sure it's working okay. Maybe practice with different platforms that you might be using, get skilled with those. There's a lot of that. There's a lot that can be gained from the dry firing. I've gotten a ton of that. It'd be the same as, you know, having a light day at the gym, you know, where you're just working through mechanics, or you're deloading, right? Where you're working through light day. I'll call it deloading, where you planned this right into your program as to not stress your body out. It's actually like a recovery week. That's what a deload week would look like, where you drop the reps, drop the loads, drop the volume, drop the intensity, whatever. There's different variables you can adjust there to increase your proficiency while your body's also recovering. It's also a great way to evaluate, like, what am I doing wrong here, right? Because again, like you said, it's free. I can do it in a closet practically. Like I can do it in the bathroom. I don't need to have a ton of space to do this.
Yeah. Work things out. You know that there's no stress. You can really work out movement. And, yeah, man, I think people don't do that enough. And I think we were talking about this with, Raul earlier, that, and this might be going back a little bit further into this conversation, but, making sure that people implement the training that you send them home with, right? Whether it's the dry fire stuff, which is really what you should be doing outside of just the mindset stuff.
Like, right, because you can.
Yeah, everybody should be able to dry fire. You need to send them home with homework. If you really want to actually like see improvement in these individuals, they shouldn't have to come back to you every fucking day. They should have to come back like, you know, once a week or something,
or whatever's within their ability to do so.
Yeah,
right?
So maybe that's training. Maybe
that's once a month. Maybe it's every 6 weeks. I mean, again, there's getting access to a range. There's getting access to the instructor. There's the ammo. There's all the things. So, sending them home with, how does this drill translate to some dry firing at home? How do I practice these same skills? Right?
Yeah.
How does it transfer?
Yeah, and like another thing too with the physical induced stress, which I know we kind of like skipped over that a little bit towards the end there, but something that I did want to mention in terms of doing things at home is one of the things I did invest in for my home gym. I don't have a lot of space where I live, is an Airdyne bike, like Echo bike, Assault bike, one of those things. And I know a lot of people who did invest in those too, because not only do they know me, or maybe they don't know me and they just realize it doesn't take a lot of space and it's a lot of bang for your buck. Yeah, man, dude, I was doing dry fire during like the whole lockdown when I couldn't work at my gym. I'd be doing bike intervals, stepping off, dry firing, 1R1 reload, back onto the bike, and that's completely safe. And like I said, in like my program, like I'll be doing like physical induced stress, and it'll be with things like a bike, because that's the fastest way to tap into the anaerobic energy system to get some conditioning done. And probably the safest way your body can do it, other than possibly swimming. Right. And I
don't know. I would even argue that swimming, like, can be really messed up for somebody's back and shoulders. And you're talking to a guy who's done a lot of swimming in his life.
You're honestly probably.
I mean, there's no posterior chain, anything in that.
Yeah, I haven't done a ton of swimming. I'm just thinking in terms of low impact.
Yeah, gotcha. I hear where you're coming from.
Yeah. My biggest thing for me personally, and any athlete I've ever worked with, is the bike has never fucking hurt somebody. Usually you hurt the bike, right? And with that being said, it's low impact. It's pretty much total body outside.
It's controlled.
Outside of maybe the midline. Yeah, you're not going to fucking fly.
You're not pounding your body. Yeah.
Yeah, and like, guess what? You can just literally let go of the handles, put your feet on the pegs if it's too much. And my point in saying that
self-limiting.
Yeah. My point in saying that is, like, you want to get somebody to puke as fast as possible. Tell them to go as hard as you can on a bike for 1 minute straight. Or you can have strategy and do interval training.
And be smart about it.
Yeah, exactly. So my point is that whether you have a SIRT gun, an airsoft gun, just your actual firearm you use, completely unloaded, dry fire, there's ways to be at home and get better at this shit instead of paying hundreds of dollars to be at somebody's course and then feel like you puked and you actually didn't retain any of the information because you're so physically fatigued.
Again, yes. I mean, things your sort of your IQ, your range IQ or your shooting IQ begins to drop as soon as we start to add these stressors on, right? These variables on. And at what point is it too much, right? At what point is it too much? And I think we've all seen somebody that's gotten, if you've been out to the range enough times or you've been to the gym enough times, the gym's kind of an easy one to tell. That's when you see the person laying over there on their back with their feet up and they're white as a ghost.
Yep.
They crossed over, right? They took it too far. That's not a good thing, right? That's not a good thing. I think it may have some sense of good, and now you know.
Yeah,
right?
Because character building.
Yeah, it is. Well, you never know what your limit is until you've gone to your limit, right? Or a little bit past it, or even way past it. Like now I know where my limitations are, and I can manage those. Or if you can measure, you can manage. Well, I know 1 minute as fast as I can go on the Aerodyne bike. That's it. Like I'm puking at that point. So, but can I make it to 55 seconds without puking or whatever? My goal being to surpass a minute at some point. But I think your point is, without getting going too far down that road, is there are ways to dry fire and induce this physical stress, right? And practice, so that when you do go out to the range and you are feeling this physical stress, the next part of this is one of the things that's probably going to go away first is your fine motor skill, right? When you're fatigued. So making sure that, going back to the timer piece, when you're practicing with the timer, you're also practicing your accuracy. And I see this a lot, like you're standing at, let's say, 7 yards, and we're working these drills where you're going as fast as you can. Now, practically, like if you're in a gunfight, right, or if you're in that situation, you're putting those shots on A zone, you're doing okay, right? Like you're putting them in center of mass, and that's probably a good thing, right? But are you really is at 7 yards? You're almost like, if you're putting it in the right direction, you can probably get pretty close to hitting that, that A zone almost every time.
I'm pretty sure that like at 10 yards, I can just point and shoot.
More or less.
Yeah.
I think probably a lot of people would probably agree with you, in their own skill level, but maybe working those dot drills a little bit longer under the timer, right? And not pressing the speed as much with those. So you're really working on that accuracy versus just how fast can you unholster and get shots in the A zone. More, okay, how fast am I out of the holster or out of my low ready, high ready, compressed ready, whatever else, and into the dot, right? The 3-inch dot. Because that's way harder, obviously. So you're trading one for the other in terms of your accuracy for the speed. And then how do you dial that in and kind of meet in the middle with, okay, now I'm fast and I'm accurate. And so that's a way to use the timer a little bit differently than what I typically see happening out there on the range. And people could argue with me, yeah, man, well, if you're hitting A zone, you're doing okay. Okay, great. Well, then that's fine. But would you prefer to be more accurate, right? Because what you're talking about is somebody that's standing still, right? You're talking about a piece of paper that's squared up to you. You're squared up, right? They're not turned. They're not moving, right? Their silhouette is as big as a human being, right? At exactly the right height, same height as you, 5 or 6 feet tall off the ground. That's way different if they're turning, they're running, they're behind something. Every shot you fire down range is your responsibility, right? Yeah. Every one of those things counts. So, maybe work on more slowing it down a little bit and just being a little bit more accurate, and then trying to bring those two things together over time. So I think those are different ways that you can include the timer. You mentioned including the timer with a little bit of extra physical stress, and maybe include the timer with a little bit more pressure to be more accurate, right? Rather than just gaming the drill, right? Gaming the drill.
Yeah, no, like at the pistol movement course we did, Andrew, the person who won the timed challenge at the end, he actually was like right there on top of my score, but since he missed a shot, we had that 2-second penalty. Yeah. Him and me, like, virtually, I think, had the same time. I'm not exactly sure. I don't remember my time 100%. I just remember us being the same seconds. You know what I mean? And I was just like, well, fuck, dude, if you just would have stayed on target, you know what I mean?
Yeah. What was the lowest common denominator there? Is conditioning.
Yeah. So with him, like, what did he do after that course? He's fucking working out with us now.
Exactly. He's like,
good job, dude. Again. I fucking give that guy a hug when I see him. Right, you know what I mean? Right. So that's the idea, though, right? Is that, like, after we did that course, is like, dude, how else can I help you further your training, to the best of my abilities?
Yeah, I mean, because he's accurate, right? And he's got very good mechanics, very good skills, very solid sense of self-awareness, confidence. Where the lowest common denominator for him, and he knows this and he recognizes it, and now he's applying himself, was the physical fitness perspective and his ability to move efficiently. Because after the thing, he was gassed and he was doubled over. And even at that, he still performed very well. So imagine that guy with a little bit better engine, a little bit better movement mechanics.
If he trained with us, you know what I mean, over the course of the next 3 to 6 months, he's probably going to be out shooting me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I would think it would probably be out shooting just about everybody out there.
Yeah.
Like, because if that's it, man,
if that's all
we know that shit.
Yeah.
Like,
and I actually like stood next to him because we had a few of us on the range. And so I was able to get some like personal time with some of them. And I like watched him through like the dot torture. And outside of offhand shooting, that kid's a stud.
I would venture to say that most of the people out on the range that you see that perform at a high level after 4 or 5 hours of shooting are going to be your most physically fit people out there.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've trained the physical component, but that also means they've trained the mental and psychological component as well.
That's funny that you say that, dude, because I think I told you this maybe. Bryant had said, like, dude, not to sound mean, but I almost feel like you get better with the more stress added, like the more physical movement, the more timers, like the more layers to like everything. And I told him, I was like, possibly, honestly, maybe. Also, I get kind of bored just standing in front of cardboard, and this is like a fault I have. I need to like be better about just doing the boring shit. You know what I mean? Because I like moving around. I'm fucking always like running around. But another thing is I'm probably affected the least by the added running out of everybody in our group currently. And so I think that might look like I'm getting better, but really I'm just staying the same.
Right. You're able to stay your 80%.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not trying to make the wheels fall off, but I'm trying to make sure that I lead by example. Right. So I am trying fucking hard, but I'm also keeping it within the parameters. I'm getting all my hits.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing here, just in terms of like the how to incorporate this stuff. So we talked about the dry fire. We talked about working on the accuracy over time, right? Remember, it's not just the timer, right? How are there ways for you to become more accurate and try different things and not necessarily try to game the drill? But going back to the physical component is understanding your ability, understanding your limitations as a participant or as a shooter or as an athlete or whatever else, and being accountable to those limitations or for your own personal growth, right? Like what, and again, you just named a couple people that we know personally that are really holding themselves accountable to that. Like,
dude, it's so cool.
I could be so much better if I just hold myself accountable to getting to the gym and doing the thing, right? So holding yourself accountable to that, but it's understanding and bringing awareness to that. And again, I've seen a lot of things out there, and I see a lot of things out there where people aren't aware. You know, they're just not aware of what it is they need to improve on in order to be better. They think they need to be spending more time on the range, you know, when they need to improve their fitness. You know, they think they need to be spending more time on their strength training when they probably need to spend more time maybe focusing on fat loss, so they're a little lighter, right? Or they're spending a little bit more, they're spending so much time on their power program, right? Clean, snatches, jerks, all those kind of things, when they could probably be spending a little bit more time on some basic strength for some of those weaker areas, which would make them a better athlete out on the, you know, on all the things that they do. And then, you know, particularly as it translates to the range. So there's all these different things in evaluating what your own limitations are and how they impact your ability to perform. And it's not just about the timer, right? And it's not just about, you know, being able to put shots on a target from, you know, 5, 7, 10, 15, 20, 25 yards. It's putting all the pieces together, but also, again, understanding what my limitation could be or is. And this goes back to the peer review stuff. Yeah. Right. Nobody needs to be told that they suck. Right. So, you know, our philosophy has always been and always will be, both as coaches here or maybe outside of here. And it's the same with, you know, my kids, right? My employees, my family, you know, all the people in my life that I care about. It's always encouragement over negative reinforcement. Yeah. Right? Nobody needs to be told they suck. Nobody 100%. Needs to be told to fuck off. Nobody needs to be said, you know, you need to be better or don't come back here. Like, no. Encourage them to get better and give them some meaningful and actionable feedback to help them be better and get better.
Yeah, I agree. Like with all my athletes, with CrossFit, like it's kind of funny because I never give them like negative feedback. And so they kind of just know with me now that like either I love it or like I'm like, oh yeah, that wasn't bad, you know, but like it's like never like negative, you know what I mean?
It's indifferent.
Yeah. And then they're kind of just like, well, fuck, dude, he hates me now. Like obviously I did something wrong.
Well, it's interesting because I'm like, I always performed really well. Like if my coach wasn't yelling and spitting, you know, while he was talking to me, like I I felt like I might've been doing something wrong. Like more importantly, like if they stopped talking or yelling and spitting in my direction, like I was worried, like I'm fucking up, like he doesn't care anymore. Like that's how I took it. And that's not everybody, right? Like, so maybe some people can, you know, I guess take that feedback that way a little bit differently. It never bothered me, right? I took it personally, but I took it personally in a productive way. Other people take that, you know, much different. And let's be honest, we live in a soft fucking world right now. So God forbid you should offend anybody by giving them the truth. Yeah. But there are ways to deliver that information to somebody in a productive manner, and it should be through encouragement, not negative reinforcement.
Yeah, I mean, usually with me, I'm not like handing out awards, for sucking, but usually I'll be pretty upfront and be like, yeah, well, you know, you need to use your lats to pull that bar in on the clean and lock the elbows out instead of bending them and pulling in with biceps, you know. But other than that, it was pretty good, you know. And then at that point, they know like they fucked up, but they also don't like hate me for it or feel like, man, dude, I suck. Like,
well, it's a fair point, and you left them with something to walk away with and work on the next time.
Yeah, exactly. But then they also know, because like I never want to be negative, that like when, for example, Bryant smoked that when we were going over the rifle course, he smoked that last drill, dude. Like I gave him a hug. Because like that's kind of like people know, like when I'm excited, like, oh shit, like I didn't have to say much. They just know like they did it right. You know what I mean? So like there was ways that like you can pretty much tell if I'm like, or like you loved it. And there's not really any like, dude, you need to be fucking better. You know what I mean? Like we're out here, we're coaching people, you need to be better. You know, I wasn't like that with Bryant or any of my athletes really. You know what I mean? So, and like I said earlier, like when I got, you know, shit talked to me, it was a good learning experience, I guess, but it was like shitty training days. Mm-hmm. Shitty. Like it didn't do anything for me in terms of like a team aspect. I didn't feel like I was like, I never wanted to shoot with those people again.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, what it is let's be honest, you know, we need to have as a community a better, more clear and positive voice to normalize this. And if normalization to you as an instructor or participant means making somebody feel shitty because they're not as good as you, or they're not as proficient, or they don't have the physical skill yet, and you're bad mouthing them, or you're laughing at them, or you're demeaning them, or you're not being inclusive for that matter, you're not trying to help them, then you're not helping any of us. You're not helping any of us. You're not helping the instructors. You're not helping the participants. You're not helping the people that are trying to come out and be better. So maybe just re-examine, you know, how it is that you're handling yourself and how you can take personal responsibility for helping that person improve. And that includes instructors, right? So, you know, what kind of feedback, maybe they don't want to hear it, but as long as you're delivering it in a respectful and encouraging and, again, practical, but also, it's the word I'm looking for, I guess, actionable way. Like I wouldn't be afraid to do that, because we all need a little bit more of that. And God damn it, we could all be a little bit more humble.
Yeah. Yeah.
Going back to the macho.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that even if we're not talking about fitness or firearms, just in general, I think people need to like, if they're going to do something, this is something that's getting lost nowadays, is they need to like love what they do and like treat it like they love it. Meaning like get good at everything that makes you a professional. And like I told you earlier, like before we did this, I was like, hey man, just to lead by example, I could give a fuck if I have a 6-pack, but I should probably get closer to 6-pack than beer belly. Cause right now, you know, all the traveling I gain, you know, 10 pounds or 15 pounds or something like that. And obviously I'm still running around working out all the time. So it's not like I'm fucking in bad shape. I'm just not where I want to be, as an example. And that's not even me because of my own personal reasons. I'm totally happy with myself. It's really just like, if you're going to be a professional in any space, you have to be a professional in all capacities.
Gotcha.
Right. So like, I don't know, hopefully, us being some fitness guys, hopefully this, has added value across the board.
I hope people can take it away and they start thinking about their training a little bit differently, both in the gym and outside the gym, on the range or anywhere for that matter, whether it's lifting weights or riding bikes or running or hiking, swimming, you know, all that stuff, or shooting. I think, you know, there's some stuff that you could maybe be thinking about maybe a little bit differently, and hopefully it helps them.
Yeah.
Right on, man. Thanks for your time today.
Yeah, dude. I love being here.
Yeah. So. Good. Me too. I'll talk to you soon.